Does not believe in the possibility of mutually beneficial relationships in marriage or in trade or in anything else.
Of how are we measuring success here? Like, are workers' lives getting better? Can they afford more? Are they putting dinner on the table? Are we bringing more union jobs? Are wages going up? And the answer is no, no, no.
We Americans pay for the national security of North America.
What does that have to do with the tariffs?
Nothing.
This is what this fight's about.
No, it's
This is not what this fight is about.
Read your paper, the New York Times.
I don't work at the New York Times. Haven't worked there in a year and a half. Let me.
Guys, recently on Abby Phillip's show, MAGA Pundits got absolutely wrecked trying to defend Trump's trade war against Canada. Yeah, Canada, our neighbors, our closest friends, and our strongest allies. Abby and the progressives on that panel fact-checked these MAGA clowns so hard that they had nothing left to say. Just nonsense and illogical excuses. And honestly, it only gets crazier from here. Now, I'm going to play some clips from the show, and I'll share my thoughts as we go.
Tonight, as the Trump administration threatens economic sanctions against Iran, the country it is currently at war with, it's now escalating a trade war with one of its closest allies, Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney ended tariff talks with the United States, and in response, Trump imposed 50% tariffs on roughly $20 billion worth of Canadian goods this weekend. Trump called out Canada for, quote, ripping off the U.S. for years, adding, quote, we don't need Canada, they need us. Now, Canada says it's retaliating with their tariffs of their own, to which Trump again threatened an additional 50% auto tariff. Carney is putting the blame on the collapsed trade talks squarely on the United States.
There is a mutually beneficial deal possible here, but it has to be one that respects Canada's sovereignty, that respects our independence, that uses our complementary strengths to build something better, not tear apart for short-term gain. That's the offer.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford was less measured, telling the Associated Press Ronald Reagan would be spinning in his grave and disgusted with Trump over his treatment of Canada. Ford dug in even deeper today.
Well, he can kiss my ass as far as I'm concerned. We need to throw everything in the kitchen sink at him. He's arrogant. He's cocky.
I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass. I don't respond to a dictator like President Trump, a bully like President Trump. As I said before, he's the type of guy in school that would take your lunch money one day, take your toque off your head the next day, and then steal your running shoes. But I'm not going to take any advice off a guy that's the king of bankruptcies. And he's actually tariffing his own people, taxing his own people.
Terry Moran is joining us at the table. Now, leave it to Donald Trump to make Canada look like the tough guy on the world stage. They're supposed to be so nice.
They were nice. Canada nice is a thing until their neighbor and the closest partner that they had in the world, a mutually beneficial partnership, turned against them. This is the true Donald Trump. He lives in fear. I'm convinced through the night that someone somewhere or some country somewhere is ripping him off. He does not believe in the possibility of mutually beneficial relationships in marriage or in trade or in anything else. It's true. He's got a track record to demonstrate. But aside from that, there's no question that this is what Trump wants, and the American people don't. It's one thing to say, and he will go down in history for this, I'll praise him. He changed world trade policy in a way that most Americans wanted. They never wanted globalization. They never wanted China to take the entire manufacturing sector from the United States. He was right about that. But Canada? That's nuts.
I mean, Caroline, he negotiated the current trade agreement that we have with China. If you take our oil exports off the table, we have a surplus with Canada, meaning that they are buying our goods, a lot of them. Why does he have such a big problem with Canada?
Look, I think if he made the case against Mexico, right, which was a pretty distinct, compelling case that because of the fentanyl crisis, we have a lot of grievances with that country. That is why I will launch a trade war against it. Fine. Canada, different.
Not
to
fine.
your point.
I would say that is an arguable argument, but I take your point that is
on a national security standpoint, you could make a compelling case on a national security standpoint. With Canada, a benevolent neighbor to our south, our largest trade partner, However, like the last topic, I'm less concerned about this recent rally of tariffs. Even though it's 50% targeting commodities that account for less than 5% of exports out of Canada into the United States. We're talking like wooden hockey sticks that aren't even used anymore. What I am worried about
What about the
is
plywood?
if this escalates to the auto manufacturing and the production of auto parts.
That's the threat that Trump has put on the
And
table.
the reason why I caution the Trump administration against that is because with what hurts Canada will hurt Detroit. And we have a pretty contentious, probably tight race in Michigan right now for the Senate. So we don't want to give Abdul Al-Sayed any more advantage when it comes to the auto sector. I mean, Michigan rises and falls with cars, and there are Ford and GM and Honda. Those are all vehicles that are beloved by Americans that are produced in Canada. You make it difficult to make those. And yeah, you might give Abdul Al-Sayed a leg up. And I'm not so sure that's something that GOP wants.
Yeah, but also, it's also plywood, though. You just wrote a thing about how Zoomers are being priced out, and that was partly because of government policies. Is this not a government policy that's going to make them being priced out even more?
Guys, here's the actual story, and it's absolutely wild. President Trump slapped a 50% tariff on about $20 billion worth of Canadian goods after Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney walked away from trade talks. And Trump, being Trump, didn't just leave it there. He threatened another 50% tariff on Canadian autos when Canada dared to retaliate. That is insane. He says Canada's been ripping off America for years. What? Wait a second. That's absolute nonsense. It's not true, and it's not even close. In several major areas, the trade relationship is a lot more complicated than Trump's simple, they're ripping us off argument. If you take oil out of the equation, America actually sells more to Canada than Canada sells to the United States. That's called a trade surplus, guys, and it's the opposite of getting ripped off. It's the opposite of losing. But sure, let's start a fight with our neighbor and best customer, because apparently that's a real chess move there. And you know what? Canada did not roll over. Ontario Premier Doug Ford got aggressive on live TV, basically telling Trump to kiss his backside. He compared Trump to the bully in school who steals your lunch money one day, your hat the next, and your shoes after that, which honestly might be the most accurate description of Trump's entire trade policy I've ever heard. And it came from a guy who runs Ontario, not a comedian. And here's where the MAGA pundits tried to save face, and it did not go well. One guy tried to pivot and claim this whole thing is really about NATO and defense spending, not trade at all. That is a MAGA classic move when you don't have an actual answer, straight out of the deflect and hope playbook. Real smooth, except the actual U.S. trade representative already came out and said, on the record, that the breakdown was about trade terms, not defense. So this guy's out here inventing talking points that his own side already debunked, live, on camera, in real time. That's not spin, that's just getting caught with your hand in the cookie jar. And when he got pushed on it, he started talking louder, like raising the volume was going to substitute for having an actual point. And it didn't. It never does. In my opinion, this trade war hits your wallet directly, and that's a part MAGA creeps don't want to talk about.
I'm a free trader. I'm a free trader, like through and through.
Right.
I mean, I'm much more Reagan-esque.
This is a problem then, right? That there are tariffs on plywood.
I would say yes. It is.
I hope you would say yes.
It is. But the point that I was saying earlier is like it's not. It's at less than 5% of Canadian exports. So it's less concerning to me than if this escalates to the auto industry, which
it should be concerning to us all because the pass-through is to American companies and consumers. Overwhelmingly, Americans are paying these tariffs, even though the president keeps lying and saying that the other countries are paying the tariffs and we're getting money into our coffers. No, Americans are paying more because the goods cost more when they get here. Now, you can make an argument that that is putting pressure on manufacturers in other countries. You can say that their products are now higher here, so maybe we buy fewer of them and more of our own. That is different than saying the Americans say, I want the thing that I've been getting, and it comes from there, and now it costs me 50 cents more on the dollar than it cost me last month. That is the problem.
That's a good explanation of tariffs. That's a very good elementary explanation of tariffs.
Well, the elementary or college is the explanation that is correct.
Economist Justin Wolfers made an interesting point. He said Trump is trying to boost the U.S. economy by making it harder for Americans to trade with the rest of the world. He's also promising to destroy Iran's economy by making it harder for Iranians to trade with the rest of the world. Make it make sense, Horace.
I can. There are two national security arguments with Iran and with Canada. If you go back 6 months ago, what we were talking to them about was reaching their 2% GDP, which they did in late 2025. But for 9 years before that, they weren't even at 1%. Hold on.
What are you,
and
you're talking about
What is the
Canada.
national
Yes.
security?
Let me just make sure I'm
national
following
security
where you're
issue.
going here.
We Americans pay for the national security of North America.
What does that have to do with the
NATO,
tariffs?
Nothing.
This is
And the
what this
national
fight's about.
security
No, it's
This is
not.
not what this fight is about.
Read your paper,
I-
the New York Times.
I
and
don't
you
work
will
at the
see-
New York Times. Haven't worked there in a year and a half. Let me just say
Sorry
this.
about that.
I don't be sorry because I'm not sorry. Here's the
Point
thing.
is, the New York Times has been clear that the primary
Okay.
debate
Just
and
because you get
dispute-
louder and louder doesn't
But
make you right or
let me-
right.
let me-
Okay,
Here's my
hold on.
question.
Before you
In
go,
what ways is it a national-
before you
Yeah,
jump in,
okay,
let me
you
just
got it.
play. This is what J.D. Vance said today about why we're fighting with Canada. Listen.
Canada and China have been the two worst countries when it comes to trade policy anywhere in the world. What a shame that is. China, you of course expect. They're our biggest economic competitor. I would expect that from China. I would not expect that from Canada. We have to remember, Canada is a state. Sorry, Freudian slip. That was actually an accident.
No mention of NATO there, okay? He's not talking about NATO. He's actually likening Canada, with whom we have a trade deal that his boss negotiated, to China.
J.D. Vance is not the best vice president, but he is a worse stand-up comic, and it's hard to watch. But
Guys, tariffs are not some magic tax that foreign countries pay out of their own pocket while America collects free money. That's not how this works, and honestly, if you've heard Trump say Canada is paying us billions, that is a completely misleading way to describe what is actually happening. The company importing the goods pays the tariff, and that company can pass those costs right down to the consumers. And we, the consumers, standing at checkout, start wondering why everything got more expensive again. Let's start with lumber. Canada is one of the biggest suppliers of the wood used to build homes in America. Slap a huge tariff on wood, and guess what happens to the cost of building a house or fixing your deck? It goes up, obviously. That's not exactly advanced economics. And guys, right now, we're already in the middle of a housing affordability disaster where young people can barely scrape together a down payment. So MAGA wants to lecture Gen Z about avocado toast while simultaneously making an already expensive housing market even harder to deal with. And things didn't stop there. Then there's cars. And honestly, this one's even bigger, and it can get worse before it gets better. American and Canadian auto manufacturing is basically one big tangled system. Parts cross the border back and forth before a car is even finished. Ford, Honda, GM, all of it, deeply tied to Canadian plants and suppliers. So a 50% auto tariff doesn't just hurt Canada, it jacks up production costs for American car companies, which means higher prices for when you go buy a truck. And states like Michigan, where the auto industry is a huge part of the economy, could take a real hit. And here, this egotistical clown in the Oval Office is doing a great job risking American jobs to own the libs. And here's the interesting thing. Canada isn't just sitting there taking it either. They're hitting back with their own tariffs, targeting American exports, which means American manufacturers and farmers can lose access to an entire market. We've seen this before. The last time Canada specifically targeted politically sensitive American industries to make it hurt where it counts. So buckle up. I mean, as we speak, round 2 is apparently already loading. Now put it all together and you get more pressure on the cost of homes, higher prices on cars, American farmers getting squeezed, and higher inflation.
you know, when I look at this, I'm really asking this question of how are we measuring success here? Like, are workers' lives getting better? Can they afford more? Are they putting dinner on the table? Are we bringing more union jobs? Are wages going up? And the answer is no, no, no. So, you know, it's difficult for me to explain how J.D. Vance can get up and own a win here when isolating one of our closest allies and failing to deliver for workers, manufacturers, farmers.
Manufacturing jobs actually have increased. The last jobs report, manufacturing jobs.
And
yeah,
what's going to happen in January 2027?
But I want to get back to this terrible. I want to get back to this terrible argument that says that the national security is the reason that we should be raising tariffs that cost Americans more money. Now, make that make sense?
Okay. What happened is for 6 months, we've been having this back and forth and back and forth. And in order to pull them up to the 5% commitment that other NATO members have had, the president announced we are not continuing our existing agreement. Canada then said, well, fine, we don't need that. And this has escalated. The issue is the negotiators are not talking about these things that you described. They are talking about the NATO commitment.
Hold on. I just have to say that is not.
That is
the
not
case.
what this is. Just because you enunciate your words
Let me
doesn't
just
mean
say
that's true.
that is not the case. When the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer talked about where the breakdown happened, the breakdown was over trade. The breakdown was over whether Canada was willing to basically subserviate itself to the United States on trade. And to be honest, it's hard to see why any country would want to do that. Any sovereign nation.
Carney is going to hit back, and he's right. Now, Canada used to be a first-ranked defense country, and they aren't anymore, and that is an issue. But that's not what. But that's not what this is about.
It's a huge issue.
And what it really is about is, once again, Trump and Vance trolling. Trump called Carney Governor Carney. He said, "Oops, I didn't mean to say they were a state." That infuriates Canada. It breaks real relationships that we need.
Male performance that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are trying to put on.
Carney wins re-election by promising not to increase defense spending. Now, what he comes in and tells us is an entirely
that's not what this is
different.
about.
That is not what this is about.
This whole alpha male.
He's right that they need to contribute more.
That Canada's ripping us off. That happens to
They
not
are,
be true.
if
But
they
that's what the
free ride on
president
national
believes
In
is happening.
geopolitics,
Guys, this is all happening over a country we actually have a deeply integrated economic relationship with. And don't forget, tariffs like these will drive the prices higher on everything from groceries to appliances, depending on what gets hit and how businesses pass the cost along. This isn't some way of protecting American workers. This is picking a completely unnecessary fight that will make ordinary Americans pay the bill. What makes me sad is that the MAGA media tries to convince you it's actually a win. No, you morons, it's not a win, especially if you're the person paying more at the store or dealership. And secondly, guys, keep the money aside for 1 second and think about what this does to the relationship itself between the two countries. Trump's out here calling Canada the 51st state like it's some cute joke, and VP J.D. Vance is comparing Canada's trade behavior to China's, like Canada has suddenly turned into some hostile foreign adversary. I mean, the hell have you guys been smoking? It's absolutely ridiculous. Canada has always had our back for decades, including sending troops to fight alongside us. And history is full of examples where burned trust took decades to repair, and Canada has a long memory. You don't build alliances like that back overnight once you torch them. And Trump and his crew are out here torching it for what? A photo op and a tough guy soundbite? Like, let's be honest for a second. Doug Ford didn't get that angry over nothing. That anger is Canada telling us loud and clear that they're done being pushed around. In my opinion, this whole situation is a masterclass in how to turn a friend into a skeptic, and it didn't have to happen this way. Trump could have picked literally any other fight and made a stronger case, but he chose the one ally who never deserved it. And that's the part I think people need to keep watching as this trade fight unfolds. That's it for today, guys. So what do you think about Trump's trade policy with Canada? Is it good or bad for ordinary Americans? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like the breakdowns and want more like this, please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video.